welcome you back to the second half of our presentation tonight. Again, I'm Linda Fragel, and today we had just heard about what to do with your yard waste and how we can get it off of your property for you. And now we're going to learn a lot about fire prevention and what we can do at our homes. Tonight we're having Dr. Robert Sieben. He's a neurologist and a pediatrician, and he survived the 1991 Oakland Hills firestorm. That firestorm destroyed 3,000 homes and apartments and unfortunately left 25 fatal fatalities. He believes that knowledge is the best insurance, and that's why he's had him here tonight, so he can provide us with some of his knowledge. Dr. Sieben has been beating the drum to motivate homeowners to clean up their yards and help with hillside vegetation management to reduce the fuel load in their communities for nearly 2 decades. Dr. Sieben has been a volunteer coordinator of the fire prevention for his Homeowners Association since 1998. And he is also a member of the International Association of Fire Chiefs and a founding member of the Oakland Fire Safe Council. He has served 4 terms on the advisory committee of the Oakland Wildfire Prevention Assessment District, which he also chaired. And he also serves on the North Hills Community Association, chairing its fire prevention committee. And he's also is an author, and he's written a book called Homeowner's Guide to Fire Prevention. And we brought copies tonight for you. And it's also, if you'd like more than 1 copy to pass around to your family members, because it's very useful, they're also for sale for $5. Join me in a warm welcome of Dr. Sieben.
A few things off the record before we start recording. Dave Fredericks is making a recording, and I'm going to try to save the questions till afterward because it's difficult to do during it. We're making that available on YouTube, and my whole thing is getting the message out, because what I found, I learned all this stuff the hard way by blood, sweat, and tears. In fact, I spent 3 hours on the hill with some volunteers that showed up last Saturday and 45-degree slopes going after some rogue broom on slopes you could hardly keep your balance on. They were so steep and slippery, just because I have a thing about broom, which we'll get into. Anyway, so we'll start the recording in a minute, but please save your questions. There'll be plenty of time afterward. I'm supposed to be quiet by 8:15. I think it will take about a half an hour to get through this. And I'm also going to show 5 slides at the end of it, which are not going to be taped because these are copyrighted photos. And Linda's going to pass out the brochures, which really show what embers look like, which I think is your greatest danger up here, by the way. So, that being said,
You start, thank you.
we can start, okay? Okay. First of all, the bad news. I'm going to end with good news. The bad news is, of course, we've had this extreme drought, and it's not getting any better. For example, in Oakland, the area I'm familiar with, we've had less rain than average. And up until recently, there was more rain in Oakland last year than there was this year. Last year was a severe drought year. So the drought's here to stay, and throughout the country, wildfires are at record levels. For example, there was a fire in British Columbia that was so intense when I went to a family reunion up near Helena, Montana, my great-grandfather's descendants. The fire up there was burning so strong that one of the people visiting from North Carolina said they had soot in the air that far away. And this is what we're up against. The fire prevention budget is gutted nationwide. A lot of money that was earmarked to go into prevention and thinning trees and so forth had to be used for fire suppression. So we're really at extreme risk. As of number 4, the risk of major fire is extreme this year, and we haven't had enough rain to make much of a dent. Their tree die-off is up to 70–80% in some areas. And the firefighters are likely going to be overwhelmed until the wind changes, when the big ones get going. I'll come back to this. Next. Okay, this was, just to give you a perspective, the Oakland fire was 1991. Of all the major fire reports I've heard from the International Association of Fire Chiefs and so forth, this fire was unique, and the fact that it did all of its devastation in 6 hours. The Valley View fire up near Lake County, for example, lasted about 3 days. The biggest one mentioned at the International Fire Chiefs meeting in Reno the year before this was in Colorado Springs, and their problem was where to house the firefighters and so forth, because it lasted like 12 days. One in Australia lasted over a month. The state of Washington, it was lasting for weeks. The wind-driven fires, exactly what you're concerned about here, are extremely fast, and this makes it that much more important what you do in advance. Next picture, please. And that, just to show you where Oakland is at risk, these big, keep my hands out of the film, sorry. The dry northeast winds build up, come right through that gap in mountains, go out the Golden Gate. So in an extreme fire trap. There's a photograph taken in the Chronicle a couple of dozen years ago. I remember seeing about the Yolo fire way up in Yolo County, and you could see the smoke just following that exact path. Down in the corner by that X there is where you are. You don't quite have those extreme winds, but you still get, I understand, quite strong winds down here. So this makes it particularly bad. For example, if I want to start a fire in my barbecue, I use a hair blower, and it really helps it ignite. Next picture. This is what the fire was like in 1991. Those are all foundations. The temperatures got up to 1800 degrees with the intensity of the fire, and it just gives you an idea how disastrous it could be. Up in Hiller Highlands, it was all gone in 15 minutes, by the way, and that's where several of the deaths were. You had that much time to get up. You don't even have time to announce an evacuation. You just run for it. Next. Okay, but the good news, this is solvable. And that's what I want to talk about tonight, because it is solvable, and it's our responsibility as the homeowners, and you'll see why. Next. So there's no reason, you know, this victim idea that you can't do anything is absolutely wrong. And I get really furious and upset with people in my own area when they complain about fire inspections telling them to do something. I say they should be telling you to do a lot more. The homeowner themselves, they own what we call the ignition zone, which I'll talk about. And therefore, they own the fire. And if the homeowner, let me use this year, whatever, if the homeowner does his job, the fire department isn't going to have a chance, especially in areas like this, where the fire comes so fast and all you can do is evacuate. Next. So again, it's what you do before a fire that counts. And insurance isn't going to help you, because you're going to lose your home, your pets maybe, your life maybe, and you're going to fight. If that happens, you've got 10 years of hell to go through to get your house going, you lose your community, and it never covers the losses. Fire prevention not only is more effective, it's far cheaper. Next. So I want to get away from PowerPoint slides very quickly. This is a visual presentation, and that's what I want to concentrate on. But this is a very important point, and in taking a 2-hour drive around today, I think this fits it. Number one, homes are ignited by embers in 75% of cases nationwide, particularly where we have winds like you have here. So this idea of an interface gives you a false sense of security. I know people that they were the second house in from the vegetation. and they think they're safe. Those things go a half a mile. They can go for 2 miles. They had them landing at Candlestick during the Oakland fire. So it's a very false sense of security to talk about an interface. You're at risk here, and I think by far the greatest danger here is the embers. Heat conduction is second, and it's far behind second. Heat conduction, you're fairly safe. There are recent studies up there that are very interesting that if you're 30 feet from the fire front, it's pretty hard to ignite the house. But you're getting closer to that, or if houses are very close together, which problem you don't have here where they're 10 feet apart or connected where I am, that's the next cause. Direct flame is rarely the cause of the fire. It looks beautiful on television, but that's not what's going to ignite your house. Next, please. So there are 6 points I want to make. The first one is don't start a fire. All the fires in this area, with rare exception, are caused by humans. It's outlined in the book. Cigarettes and bed are the most common one. I want to get on to other points that's covered in the book. Next. This gives you an example. This says up Hiller Highlands up there, 2008. Someone is in their car early in the morning on a hot day. They parked right down there and smoked a cigarette while they're on their cell phone and flipped it into what was dry grass all over that slope. This was June. We don't even start thinking about really high risk. That was on June 8th, where you see the, I have a clicker, I'll use it. The willows there were loaded with dead wood. Willows are native, but that didn't help. There's lots of dead wood in here, lots of dry grass in here. We didn't do fire prevention up here too much because the slope was so steep. It carried it right up here and singed those houses. So, and this is just some of the stuff that was taken off for pickup. And by the way, as a side, you notice how the points and all the brush are pointing toward the curb. It makes it much easier to pick that stuff up and stick it in a dumpster. Next. Here is another turnout, and this emphasizes don't start a fire. These are where the cigarettes get tossed, or people back into it with catalytic burners. And this is an area that is, we don't even own this area to the right, but we take care of it because we're at risk. And even before the '91 firestorm, a fire had started here and singed the houses about a year before, which was a good warning sign. The fire doesn't care who owns the property. Next. This is another area, another turnout. Next. The road's down in the right-hand corner, but this is an area where another area we covered to increase our fire prevention 100 feet up. This is all this brush that got hauled down. The oak tree here is laddered where the lower branches are cut, and this was picked up by a free service like you have. Next. This is farther up that hill where we have valuable redwoods. And these are workers getting all the brush out from underneath them, and this was too high up to carry down to that area. So all this brush was taken and compacted and then cut up with chainsaws into a decomposition pile in a safe area where it wasn't going to get ignited. This is another thing that we've learned, especially on steep slopes like that. You don't last long if you're going up and down, and the costs of removal are extreme. So this is another technique we've used where the situation permitted us to do it. Next. This is another approach to, well, this is special. You need, one thing we're trying to ensure access to the fire. The hills up there in Hiller Highlands I'm talking about, there's a Caldecott tunnel in the background. And they're very steep, and they were a lot of roads cut to get gravel and so forth, and rock to elevate the freeway going through Highway 24. This was like a quarry, and this was a road they used to do it. We have opened up this road. It's 11 feet wide, so CAL FIRE trucks can get in there. There's a fire hydrant at the left lower edge right next to the road, and this goes a third of the way across the property. And after that, we have a fire road, fire access path that goes another third of the way up through willows like those ones we saw before. So we can get a hose across there, otherwise there's no way of getting in there. By the way, you'll notice in 2001, which is really when I started getting really involved, notice all the broom. And this is stuff that once it gets started, it is extremely difficult to get rid of. Next. This is the upper part of that fire road as it looks now. This is an ignition site because this is a very popular party site. College students will go up there, wherever they are, and will throw stuff down the hill, or smoking cigarettes, pot, you name it. So we're particularly careful to keep the area mowed above it. By the way, a lot of these pictures you'll see green grass. It looks beautiful. In the summer, it's all brown. So it doesn't, oh, by the way, in that fire road, you can leave it there. Not only can the fire trucks get up there, but there's a wide, safe turnaround, which we keep free of brush and grass so that the fire trucks are not at risk going in there. So that was the first thing. Don't start a fire. The second is do fire prevention year-round. Next. This is an example of what that broom looked like when we started. And I'm going to, by the way, there is broom here that's getting a start. And this took 30 cubic yard dumpsters of the stuff we took off the hill. It also took, there's tons of it that we cut up and left on the hill. The stuff grows 15 feet high. It wipes out other species. And it's extremely difficult to control. It's ruined Point Reyes, it's ruined Big Sur, and you've got some significant brooms starting here. It's very easy if you take care of it before it gets to that point. You couldn't even get through this stuff when we started. Next. And this is an example of a broom plant, and this is Gerhard. He pulled this root out by hand in the rainy season, once it had soaked in. So and that root isn't going to do anything for erosion. So this is one of the reasons we were working last weekend because of the rains to take care of things in these areas that were moist because of the rain, because you really want to pull it out by the root. I don't want to get into great detail on broom today, but the worst thing you can do is go there and cut it. Because the next day the next year you get what we call a candelabra broom, where you now have 5 trunks to cut. So you've got to get the stuff out by the roots, or what I found where you can't, you can cut it, strip it, and spray a little bit of Roundup right on the top. Next. This is what that area looks like. Well, this is 2013, and this is what's maintained like now. And that before, you couldn't even see the rocks or the redwoods because of all the broom. And you can see how steep the slope is, especially that one above it, which is more than 45 degrees. By the way, when we hired professionals, because the volunteers, they just aren't up to this. We tend to have an older community. The young ones are working. It's easier to have professionals learn the slope, know what to do. And our homeowners association, with 100 homeowners, we only have to convince 3 out of 5 people on the board to fund it. The first year I talked about $10,000, we didn't get any funding. When we had that fire in 2008, we've had from $15,000 to $7,000 each year, which is only like $100, $70 per homeowner. It's the cheapest fire insurance you can get. Our budget this year is $8,500, for example. Next. Third, and this is extremely important, especially here, is to ember-proof your home. It's not that complicated. Next. This is an example of a pine tree up in the Sierra that's ignited by embers. And once that thing gets going, it sends embers long distances away. It doesn't take much to get these into the air. Next. And this is a slide that's available in that brochure. I'm going to show you examples of these different things, but all of these things around your home are danger points. And this is your property. It's not going to be inspected for you. You have to learn this stuff yourself. I think you can pretty much guess what the problems are in those different areas. I'll show you some examples next. Some of the builders up in our area got carried away with ventilation holes. I'm covered all mine with 8-inch mesh. A swallow had nested in one of those holes. Perfect tinder, as any Boy Scout knows, to start a fire. The heat, by the way, hits the wall and then goes straight up. This degree of overhang is actually against the code. But somehow this got through when they were rebuilding rapidly after the fire. Next. Here's an example of a deck that's open and the embers can get underneath there and start a fire. Next. Here's a rather crude fix, but it's cheap. 1/8-inch mesh they just tacked on in a similar situation so the embers can't get underneath that space and get going. Next. And that one, what can I say? I've said it. I mean, all that stuff is just a death sentence. Not only to this townhouse, but those on both sides, let alone another 350 of them. Once that house gets going in a big storm and downhill, that's one of the reasons that we've been able to get several grants up there, because we're the fulcrum for the ignition of all the other homes that caught on fire in 1991. Next. This is what I've done in my own home. The siding doesn't quite touch the ground, and when you slide your fingers underneath it, it wasn't sealed properly. This happens with stucco too. So if embers got underneath there, they could ignite that wall and destroy the house. The solution was the 1/8-inch plastic, and then the message, you can tell where the embers are going because that's where the leaves go. So it helps indicate that. Next. So that's number 3, the embers. Number 4 of 6, I want to talk about what I like to call the non-ignition zone, the first 5 feet. I'm not using the words defensible space because it's misleading. I'll get to that. So this is, next please. This gives an example what happened in 2008, the steep slope, where it just didn't want to go there. I tried to hire professionals, and 2 out of the 4 said that slope was too steep for them. I was 72 years old at the time. I said, what are you talking about? I can get up there. But this shows, this singed the houses. That's how close it came. And there was all this junk right next to it. Right after this, we had the original landscaper had extra seedlings for oaks, so he goes and plants them right near the house. And I have a real thing about landscapers. But that was a huge mistake. This gave us an opportunity to cut them and get them out of there. And we've had to put mats on and get low ground covers going here. We now pay attention to this area. Next. And that thing I wanted to say, this has been well documented nationally that firefighters, even in rather wild areas where they're fighting the fires, 70% of what they did is stuff the homeowner should have done in the first place. And this is my favorite quote, not just because I'm a doctor, but in the first place, do no harm. And manzanita was all over our place. I don't know what they were thinking after the fire. It burns, this stuff is dying back. We had it running in lines all the way around the property. We had cyanothus, which I'll get to, which is extremely difficult to control. We had even prostate grease plant. They planted, and also rosemary, dense rosemary, which we have spent tens of thousands of dollars getting rid of all this stuff because it grows and it turns woody. Next. This is, we visited some friends of my wife, her sorority sister up in Telluride. This is the place that we're renting up there. And I can't imagine a worse place to stick wood. The wood is right against the house. And this is only one of the piles. Not only that, but it's got a window. Windows are resistant to ignition by conduction. For example, studies have shown if you have curtains on the inside, they just get singed. If the window doesn't break, it doesn't conduct the heat enough to inflame it. But a flame can easily ignite a window. So that's the worst possible place to stack wood. I gave them a book as a present after visiting him, and this is only one of the many things I found. There's wood underneath decks, the whole bit. So it's not just vegetation, it's the home. And that's when we're driving around today, I could see examples like this. So it's the embers, particularly here, you got to pay attention to. Next. Here's a cedar, which can be a dangerous tree. It dries out. This was near windows. The window's just off the screen to your left. You've got dead wood in it, and it's right next to a chimney. This did not pass inspection. Next. And here's rosemary leading right up to a deck that sticks out over it. Bad. We've taken care of this at great expense. Next. And this was before the 1991 fire. You can see how dense, this is a steep canyon. Those are all Monterey pines, landscapers' favorite tree. This is where we took out 600 pines before that fire in 2008, and did it at a cost of something like 10 cents a tree or something, partly through volunteer efforts and just pulling the stuff. But the pine is easy. Once you cut it, it doesn't regrow. But that's all, when the fire comes, it regrows. And that just gives you an idea about how insanely the area was planted. When people were running out from the fire, they could hear the trees exploding as they ignited. Pine can just get heated by conduction. It doesn't even have to have a flame to ignite. Next. Now here's a case where we left the manzanita, but we got rid of all the other stuff. Actually, those are continuing to die, and we're getting rid of more and more manzanita all the time. At least there are no flammable fuels underneath that open deck. Next. And this is out of sight. In this place, again, the rosemary was cut back from the bush. The siding, the edges on this stucco were sealed by the builder. Not all of them were, about 30% of them weren't. The stucco is helpful. The vents are at risk, but at least they're away from stuff that's going to get into the next. And this is an area where higher up you can see that the areas close to it have been cleared of brush. Now we also have a problem, it's called erosion. And you can see the steepness of that slope. This happened to be silverberry. Why they planted that all over the place, I don't know. At least it doesn't burn. It gets into the tree as vines. We have to prune it every 7 years, but we got to preserve those roots, or we're in for big time erosion. And we've had some major erosion problems, partly because some of the houses are built on top of the rock that was excess when they made the Caldecott Tunnel. They came back and dumped it there. Not a very secure foundation. Next. This is my neighbor's house. Here's a vine that's okay. There's no dead wood in the vine. There's no ground fuel underneath. So it's a vine, but it passes. Next. Here's another example. Your fire-safe landscaping doesn't have to be ugly. There are several features about this that are fire-safe. Next. This is a tree that survived it's got singed in the 2008 fire, but it survived. It actually caught the embers and helped keep the house from catching on fire. What we do here is at least keep it away from the windows, prune it back, but the trees can catch the embers and help protect you sometimes. Next. And this is up in the Angora fire near Lake Tahoe. And this I thought was a dramatic example of a fire-safe landscape. You can see how close the fire came to the left, but the landscaping of this house saved it. One of the big problems in the Angora fire was that people left in such a hurry, they forgot to close their garage door. And that's about the embers came in and destroyed the house. Another thing that happens is that, and the firefighters have to deal with, when the embers get into the attic and get into the shake roofs or whatever it is up there, they smolder. And the firefighters are chasing the flames farther up, and then all of a sudden, a house explodes behind them. And this happened frequently. Next. This is my favorite example. She's one of our landscape chairs, and she did this herself. She's Chinese, and talk about fire-safe landscape. Look at all the features. You've got things that are pebbles and stones. You've got the big rocks. You have the thick wood by the house is thick. Thicker wood is harder to ignite than thin wood. She's just got all kinds of features there that are attractive, and yet it's a non-ignition zone. You don't want to have any of the stuff that's going to ignite. Next. This is a retired fireman's house, obviously. Talk about a non-ignition zone. He's nailed it. Next. On the problem of fences, and I noticed some issues of that here. Wood fences are a hazard. This fence up there at Hiller Highlands is continuous. It's a continuous line of flammable fuel. So this is one of the battles I've had, at least where the mulch has been pulled away from the bottom, because mulch does eventually burn, and it's kept away. And we're trying, we get to have some breaks in the fences. I sought to have one of these interrupted, but I was called several names because he thought all the dogs are going to come in and poop there and everything. But at any rate, continuous fences are a problem. Next. And here's a close-up of one of the fences. Again, stuff is raked away from below. You do have to worry if it gets rotted wood. Rotted wood ignites more easily, so you don't want your sprinkler hitting it and so forth. Next. And this is unusual. One way to break up the fences with this succulent garden, which I saw somebody opposite my son's house, and there's a vertical panel with succulents in it. Other ways of breaking it up are like an iron rod fence or a cyclone fence with some vines there, but something that breaks up that continuity. And look at the interface between the fence and the house, because you have wood on wood, that's a risk. You can put a piece of flashing in between, for example. Next. Okay, and then defensible space in the next 30 feet. We've had the non-ignition zone. Next. Okay, I don't quite like the word defensible because it implies it's going to be defended. But the idea of defensible space and maintaining this zone in a fire-safe condition, it gives you time to evacuate, which again is crucial here. It also helps you fight firefighter triage, and they're not going to be able to, they have to make a quick decision whether your house is salvageable and whether they can do it and get out. There's streets up in our area, there's no way they'd go in there. And then it helps the home survive on its own, which is our job. We can do this. Next. This is an example of overgrown woody rosemary. I can't tell you how much of the stuff we've taken off. I have a deck that sticks out about 6 feet, and the rosemary was 4 feet tall underneath it, and we took tons of that stuff out. Next. This is Ceanothus, California lilac, a favorite among landscapers. It's a native. The problem is it dies in 15 years. And we had tons of these planted in this one area. That's what we spent most of our Fire Safe grant on last year, getting rid of 30 of these dead and dying trees. It's very gnarly. It's a hard wood. It's very difficult to get rid of. A lot of it we cut into piles in this area away from anything, so we didn't have to carry it up and out. Next. This is the top of a fire chimney. Fire chimney is where you have fuel that can stay in a fire going up. And we knew this is a risky area, and part of this is doing a strategy, knowing where your risks are. And you can see where we laddered up these trees and encouraged the stuff underneath it that's good to grow, so it minimizes the danger of a fire. Next. And here's an example of a very steep slope, and we maintain this fire break so that it's not going to spread to the houses right above it. Next. And this is a little bit more complicated side. This isn't all done in 1 year. It takes years to do this. And for example, you see that you have different kinds of vegetation. Some brush, those are grease plant or baccharis that we thin out cut it, leave the roots because it's a steep slope, and then mow the grasses. And then farther away, we mow them early in the year, like early, I mean around 1st of April, something like that. And then next. And here's an example, mowing it, that's that same area, but mowing it at such a level to preserve this ground cover that's underneath it, which is a spontaneous cover, myoporium something or other, but it's a good ground cover. We mow that grass down early. Next. And here's what the ground cover looked like. So the slope's not bare. Next. And here's an example, similarly, and this grass was mowed, but it's in the close-in area. So what we do is mow the more widespread areas early, and one of the advantages is that it tends to mat down a little bit with time too, and with the fog and so forth. You don't get much fog here, I suppose. And then then the close inside, we come in for a second mowing to get it down. This area had been mowed. We had late rains the year this picture was taken, and you can see the deer in there by the X. That's how deep the grass, it had bolted up 4 feet. And that's, so we had to do a remow. And we don't take the grass off the slope, we tamp it down and so forth, and it's extremely expensive to have to haul that stuff up a steep slope. Next. And this is a similar area with it maintained. Now we're ready for the fire season. Next. And then we get into what I had a hard time dealing with. What do you call it? What about after the first 30 feet? I call it made up this name, Wildland Fuel Reduction Zone. Next. Now this gives you an idea of what we're up against in the beginning. This is the east end, the southwest end in 2001. You can see how steep it is. And the broom, that's the picture you saw, the broom. That's the kind of slope it was on. All this area became even worse. This was extremely difficult to get rid of. I can guarantee when I go up a slope like that or have anyone going up, I don't want to have to come back. So one of the things we did with this broom is where we cut it, peel back the bark, spray it, stand on the stump, and reach for the next one. And that's where we took a lot of this 30 cubic yards of broom out. And it takes obsessive maintenance to keep it out of there. That area over there where it says broom, there's no broom in that area right now. We just planted some poppies this year and some other trees. Next. And this is the middle of the area. It shows how we've aimed for a separation between the trees, the shrubs, and the grasses. You don't want all one kind of fuel. And this is one way of helping slow down the fire, is to break it up. Next. Here, now this is a special problem. That was a southwest slope. This is a northeast slope. I also took it at a time of the year when it was greener and I didn't have to go across the freeway to get the picture. But this is the northeast slope. This is, I consider, the house up there is one of the most vulnerable in our area. In fact, a photograph was taken of it in 2008 when the DC-10 or whatever it is was dropping fire retardant down right where it says on. This is a very steep slope, so the steeper, and it's facing northeast, was where our worst winds come from. So what we've had to do with this, there's this huge fire chimney on the right, where the idiot landscaper planted all these live oak trees about 25 feet apart. So as they grew up, they formed continuous crowns all the way up and down the slope. So what we've done is create a fire break around that, and then thinning out some of the smaller trees and so forth. And then you can see, next, and this is the same, that was that slope up here. This is farther down where there's this big meadow there, and that's why I don't mow it unless I have to. I think this year we're only going to go down to that fence because there actually hasn't been much grass growth. But that whole area was thinned out. Next. This is an example of how we do a little bit at a time. That's up at the top of that area. There's a lot of grass there, good grass, blue-eyed rye, which we preserved. We mow these glasses close to the house regularly. There's our decomposition pile, which just deteriorates over time, and we thin the shrubs down. We do a little bit at a time because we have erosion to worry about next. And this is from close to that same area. You can see all the growth on the northeast slope. We preserve that. Elderberries, although they're native, they really burn during the fire. And so to try to free up the stuff around the chimney, we targeted it around here. Next. And that's an example looking at the same area. This is one of the trees we cut in that area, left it on the slope. And next. These are redwoods planted after the fire, and the creosote poles were left on them. When the fire came through in 2008, they caught fire. That's what, 20 years afterwards or something like that, or no, at any rate, 16 years afterwards. So we learned, don't leave your creosote poles there, and we also learned to live up this area and take care of it. You can't appreciate it, but this whole thing, that gray in the background is sort of a cement cover for the erosion that was up there. Next. And this is a redwood. One of the nice things about the redwood, at least is where we are, is they catch the fog and it drips. So they help control it helps keep the soil moist and so forth. That's also one of the things we like about the live oaks. They have leaves on them, so when they're on a steep slope, when the rain is heavy, they break up the rain. Next. And this is a picture I took hiking up Kilimanjaro. This was in an arroyo where they had a flood. And I want you to look at this as a bunch grass, and look at how long the roots are and how they held when that got flooded. So the native bunch grasses are a very desirable plant. Next. And our policy has been to get rid of the bad stuff and let the good stuff flourish. There's no way we're going to run plant stuff all over here and water it. But here are some examples of different native bunch grasses that have just shown up when we got rid of the bad stuff. They're good because they don't burn as much, they don't take as much water, they stay green longer, and their deep roots can help hold the soil. All good things. Next. That's an example of a gorgeous stand of California fescue we have right along Tunnel Road. And what I do here is, you'll see in the next picture, is weed it out. Get the grasses out of there, thin it out, and let it go. The slope is that steep. Next. Now, to go away from our area, I want to show you a few pictures from the Valley Fire, which I toured with Ed Ore as his guest, 3 hours up and 3 hours back, because I wasn't allowed to drive for a month, that I won't get into. Next shot. Okay, we started at Middletown, the station there. Next. Now talk about a fire-safe landscape. You want your fire engine protected. I mean, they're doing everything right, okay? The building's not doing right. They got nothing around it that's going to ignite. You don't have to have your landscape looking like that, but it makes a good point. And the next slide is just down the street. And those are embers. You see isolated houses, the embers caught, they got their way in, the house is gone. So the embers make a difference. And I saw something on television that night. We were talking to one of the incident commanders, I don't know what, and saying about, well, it's all about luck. It's not about luck. It's about preparation. And that slide, that comment really irked me. Next. And welcome to Cobb Mountain. Next. This area was like a hippie camp, and I'm being taped, and we won't get into it. Anyway, it was just houses all crowded together, all kinds of wood and everything in it, and it was totally decimated. Next. This is the school that survived. There's grass around it, and they could save it. So that was defensible, and it survived. Next. Here's what some of the roads looked like up there. They wanted how are the fire trucks even going to get in there? In fact, when FEMA came to examine this area, 4 inspectors drove around in a car and just looked at it. That was their inspection. And they wanted the local guy, the CAL FIRE guy who was responsible for this area, to know, well, how many houses burned and so forth. That took 2 months of intensive work just to even figure out what had happened. Not only that, the telephone poles were out. There was no communication. The water system was wiped out. There's an article recently in the Chronicle, they still don't have water in a lot of those places. Next. And here's an example of a house I was shooting at 3,600 ISO in a moving car trying to get these pictures. I'm just trying to get, well, what were these houses like that didn't burn? But you can see the setting surrounded by all this brush. The fire didn't go through here, but you can see why so many of them burned. Next. There's one that survived. Notice the space around it. Next. There's one that didn't. And by the way, cleaning up a site like that costs $30,000 because of the toxins. Heavy metals, lead from the car batteries, PVCs, who knows what else is in there. And it costs the homeowner to pay that. So the cost of $100 a month for years in prevention is a heck of a lot cheaper. And your house doesn't burn too, hopefully. Next. Now this is interesting. There's not just the less expensive houses that burn. This is a fancy development. This house did not burn. It hadn't been sold yet. You'll notice none of the stuff was planted around it. There weren't any flammables put around it, and the house survived. Now notice all the manzanita that's cut back. Next. This is what it looked like, looking from that house across the manzanita. Fields of it. And look at all the houses reduced to rubble. Next. Speaks for itself. This is actually, that's enough. Next. Now I want you to notice something unusual about this. The question is, which burned first? The house or the trees? Or which ignited which? The answer is right here. The trees are singed on the side facing the house. So the house was ignited by embers and singed the tree. And this is another, okay, anyway, it speaks for itself. Next. This is in Montana on my cousin's huge ranch up there in northern Montana, and they're having a major problem with pine borer. They've worked with grants from, I don't know which it is, Bureau of Land Management or something, helping them. They've got about, when the trees die, they have 1 year to harvest it. And then after that, it's too late. And this is an example of what they've done to harvest it up there and leave this open space going through. Next. So, the 6 things you can do. Don't start a fire. Make it a year-round activity. We've had red alerts in January, for example. Ember-proof your home. Ember-proof your home. Absolutely essential. And I've seen a lot of examples up here where that wasn't done. The first 5 feet, make it a non-ignition zone, so you're not going to get embers from there. The next feet, make it defensible, actually thin it out and do all these things right, and then you reduce the fuels before that. I've got specifics on that. This is just a general thing. When people keep asking, what plants do I plant? It's not just what plants, it's how you maintain them. You want to have an airy plant. You don't want to have ground fuels underneath. It makes a difference if it's near a window, underneath an eave, all that kind of stuff. So you can't give flat out answers to that, but it's a maintenance problem and you have to keep on top of it. Okay, I think I'm going to shift to the other 5 slides which we won't have on the recording. So, questions? This is not being recorded, by the way, so, I think.
So where does one begin? Just kind of looking at the low-lying fruit at your house, or just trying to do a little bit each year?
I think you follow the progression. First place, don't start a fire. That's pretty clear. You know, and I've got lots of specific suggestions in the book. I also have a website. I got cards on it. I don't know if I put it out there. Wildfireprevention.edu, edu, education. Okay, there's a website there with some of the top points and so forth. But the book describes these things in more detail. First, you don't want to start a fire because that's a big deal. That's one of our major problems. Then you look at the embers, because that's the most likely problem. You're looking at the embers here more from a distance than close in. And all this stuff about mowing grass that's 60 feet away and so forth, isn't that important. It's the ember protection, and that is purely the homeowner's job, which you're not being inspected for, as I understand, and that's what you got to do. And it's not that big a deal. You look at it. I'm not talking about expensive fixes. Don't put a broom underneath the deck, which they have a picture of. Burn one of the houses in Colorado Springs, for example. Don't put your firewood next to your house. Okay, just my answer to that. And then you look at that ignition zone, that's your close-in area. Then when you get farther beyond, making sure you have the plants are fire safe, whatever there. You could have rosemary there, but you don't have 3 feet of it tangled. For example, you got to maintain that area. And then when you get into the farther out areas, the first 30 feet, you do things that'll slow the fire down, give you a chance, and you have lots of property. There are things you can do out there. So you sort of prioritize it. But for example, a lot of those areas, I've been working on that fire chimney, I've been working on that for 8 years, a little bit at a time, partly because of the erosion concerns. And also, I don't want to leave that much fuel on the hill that I have to do there, because the volunteers we had come one year to carry the broom up that hill, they never came back, and I don't blame them. Does that help answer
Yes,
it?
thank you, it does.
Okay, yes.
So my question is, would you not put gorilla hair and bark in your yard then?
No, I wouldn't. I'd use pebbles or something like that. Most of it.
Those fine.
Okay. The farther away from the house you get, then it's a different matter. But the very close-in areas, especially, I don't know which particular stuff you're talking about, but you got to be careful with the mulch so that you're not putting the fuel on. You're getting 5 feet away and you're not putting it heavy. Okay. But like a lot of stuff is made from white pine, well, that's extremely flammable. I don't know which, you said gorilla bark or?
Gorilla hair, see, I just did my backyard in the drought resistant, and that was one of the things that they require, 3 inches of mulch.
Yeah. Well, but be discreet. Don't make it 6 inches deep and go that regard. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But just for clarification, gorilla hair is very fibrous. It will not burn, it will smolder, so you don't get the ember production out of it.
Good.
Can I
Okay.
say something about
I'm always learning.
That's why it's recommended, because it won't produce your embers, it will just smolder.
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
say something about the gorilla hair?
Yeah.
Many years back, somebody up above our house was doing carpet cleaning, and this man had somehow gasoline tank that fell down on a hill, and it started coming down and it burst into fire. I happened to see it, and I took the fire extinguisher and killed it. But the gorilla hair burns.
Okay.
That's what I see myself. So
Okay, I have no experience with it.
for now.
Okay. I think there was a question about, what's the plant that animals can't eat? The deer.
Oleander.
Oleander, yeah. Oleander, normally, and you gotta individualize things, each plant. Like oleanders are aromatic, they smell, they have this thing, you think they burn like heck. The gal's coming to talk to you. One of the things I think about plants and so forth, she tried to ignite oleanders with a blowtorch or something, and she couldn't do it. They don't ignite easily
That's why
when they're well kept. Okay? And I wanted to mention, not only, one of the problems up here certainly is the broom that's gotten started is absolutely crucial to get here. And by the way, right next to it is Pride of Madeira. These plants have these beautiful purple plums. The crew I use has spent 2 weeks at Hillsborough working on these steep slopes trying to get rid of that stuff. It is extremely invasive. It is gorgeous, that's why it's here. And the third thing is the pampas grass too. With those long fronds, the kids march around with them, that stuff gets started. It's ruined like Esalen. You look down the slope, Big Sur, the stuff is just everywhere. There's no way you're ever going to get it off those cliffs. They're gone. It grows in, okay.
One more
Yes,
question.
please.
Like this mulch, there's a new kind apparently that is not hard. It's like rubberous material. What is that all about? I have not seen this before except
I
last year.
don't know the specifics,
Okay.
but you do have to worry about the flammability and that kind of stuff. We wanted, that garden I showed, the way she did it, I thought was unbelievable. Of course, it's a nice flat slope.
And the river has oil.
Mike, do you have anything to add or question?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Thank you.
Okay.
I can probably speak to Lady's questions on mulch.
Mhm.
I am apparently one of the leading experts in the state on mulch. Gorilla hair is a loose category. The name is applied to at least 20 different material limbs. They're all finely stranded. All of them are ignitable. They're ignitable from a cigarette. They're ignitable from embers. They don't really do anything exciting. They make a lot of smoke. It's unusual. Yeah, you get smoke production. It's unusual to get open flame. With all mulches, until I can prove differently, I recommend 5 feet of separation as your zero emission zone.
A house?
From the house, 5 feet, yes. Because the stuff does burn. I have done, in the last 2 years here, I've done extensive testing, ignition testing on mulches. And as a firefighter, by the way, I was a rookie firefighter when I went to Oakland Hills. I probably still had price tags on my gear. Things like the mulches, you have finely divided fuels. They're dead, they're dried, they're cured. Some of them really like to burn. Some of them really don't want to burn at all. I found a few that the public works people complain because they're also the most expensive ones on the market, but they're really hard to light. The rubber mulches, those are ground up tires. Ground up tires and they're done. I like that stuff. I really like that stuff. Now you think rubber tires, it burns hot. Yes, it does burn hot. And you don't, because of the way it's applied, it doesn't really give you a lot of flame length, but there's a tremendous amount of heat for a long period of time. However, I used, there was a couple of recent studies in the last couple of years, pretty good science, and although I disagree with most of, one of my favorite studies, I disagree with most of it because I think they asked the wrong question. One of the nuggets in the technical report is heat production rate. And I was able to convert that to kilowatt hours. And actually, there are other studies that have determined, how many kilowatt hours at what distance from your house or from exterior wood siding. At what point is it not going to catch the house on fire? And of all the mulches that were tested in this one study, the ground up tires gives you it's dramatically higher heat production rates than any of the others. But even without which would, from a firefighter, that would be the worst case scenario. There's a lot of heat coming out of this stuff for a long time. At 5 feet from the house, even old T111 siding is not going to ignite in 5 feet. Now, why I like the rubber mulch is it doesn't rot, it doesn't wash away, and it's really hard to light. You're not going to light it on accident. It's not going to ignite from the neighbor shower. You really need gas in it to get it to burn.
By the way, I have some cards out there that does have the website, which I'm overdue for some blogs on. The email is wrong, but it's read only, which is okay.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much.
It's solvable.
Thank you.
We have a lot of local vintners, and
Oh,
here
wonderful.
is a Pinot Noir.
I'll wait till I get home.
Yes, please.